sometimes it's how the players, and we're talking 15, 16, 17-year-olds that you're recruiting, how they treat their parents after a game. I used to look at that. I wanted to see, not look them in the eye. The mom said, how you feeling? A player goes off on her mother. You can really almost see how someone's going to be with you, because that's their authority figure, right? Yeah. Telling them occasionally, how life has to be, what you need to do.
Glenn Crooks is a soccer coach, broadcaster, and author with over 50 years of experience in the game. His work centers on leadership, team culture, and the human connection behind winning teams. Having coached elite athletes and covered the sport at the highest level, Glenn shares powerful insights that help coaches, players, and leaders build purpose, trust, and lasting success. Glenn, what part did you choose?
Sports.
I need some more details here, Glenn.
But it could have been music. I had the influence of my father. He was a brilliant musician and director in that capacity, but he was also a very good athlete, and he had a love of both. But he chose music, I think, because he was so exceptional. You could put him in the genius category. And for me, I just turned more towards sports. So I fairly much knew and was confident. You never know how things are going to go, but from a very early age, I just wanted to play sports. So if I could do that for a living, I would do that. And then ultimately I said, well, if I can't play, then maybe it's best I talk about it. Yeah. And that's how certain things emerged. And I ended up becoming a coach, which I think if I consider my professional path, I would say professional coach first and then everything else second, because I've spent so much time doing it.
Yeah. You've been a soccer coach now for over 5 decades, if I'm not mistaken.
It's in there somewhere since, I can't count them all, but since 1981.
It's definitely not 100 years, but I think...
No, it's not 100 years. Thank you.
But it's a couple of decades. You've also been a broadcaster. You've done thousands of interviews, a live podcast. And what is the biggest misconception people have of you when they hear soccer coach or broadcaster?
Well, I haven't thought about misconceptions, but I think if I could look on the coaching side, I think there's misconception in all sports of coaches, because one of the reasons, and I have to evaluate in my position as a broadcaster and a commentator what the coaches are doing at times, but if you're not there in the everyday environment, in the meetings, whether they're individual meetings, small group meetings, the full team meetings, in training each day, watching the activities unfold, on the collegiate level, what's happening in the classroom, and how that might influence what's going on, what might be happening in their lives outside of academics and soccer while they're in school, where the parents really are not involved and don't have any idea. So a lot of decisions are made on game day based on all these different things. So I think the misconception sometimes is coaches play favorites, the different kinds of things like that. So as a broadcaster, I can't think of what misconceptions people might have of me. But as a coach, it's pretty simple, because I think people on the outside looking in will often be critical when they don't have all the substantive data to make decisions like we do.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, when I think of coaches also, there are assumptions that you make, and you see this as you're growing up, because I was on the track team and my coach was a bit of there was a bit of favoritism going on there, but I guess every coach is different. But what are the biggest lessons soccer has taught you that life would not have otherwise taught you?
Oh, absolutely. Dealing with adversity and failure. I don't want to be too trite about it, but I had experiences, especially in my first 2 college jobs. St. Peter's College, a small Division I in Jersey City, New Jersey, and then Long Island University, Brooklyn, and starting both programs. And LIU in particular, I had recruited this class of players that were very good, and they all seemed to be excited about living in the city. But Brooklyn's a different environment, especially in 1995 and 96 when I got that thing off the ground before the rejuvenation of that area. And this is just the facts. In that time, the majority of women competing at the Division I level came from suburban communities and were white. So now we're in this heavily city majority black area, which, to be honest, I was very comfortable with. But I think what happened is it was a difficult recruit because of that, and not so much because of the children, but because of their parents, and they were concerned about the area. But anyway, I got these 9 players, legitimate good players, to commit, and 3 of them went home during preseason. And there were other things going on with the housing element. LIU made it a little bit more difficult for me in that area. And I was in a bad way.
Yep.
Because I'm trying to get this thing off the ground. I had made promises to certain players that, we're going to make this thing happen. But the result of that experience, and I point to LIU because that's where I grew up the most, became more resilient with what might happen ahead at Rutgers University, which was my next job. And we got through it. And the 6 players that stayed, and then the others that came after them, but I always credit those 6 players that stayed because 2 years later, we won the conference championship, LIU Brooklyn. No one expected it. We got through it and participated in the NCAA tournament. And I still remain in touch with all those girls because we all kind of experienced that together.
Yeah.
And I think we all have been impacted in one way or another because of that. And so I think it was a great experience for all of us ultimately.
Yeah.
They all have families. I have a family now. I was married at the time, and my daughter was just born my first year there. She's now 27, and my son was already, he's 5 years older than Morgan, Ryan. And so a lot was going on, but there was a lot of growth there, and we got through it. And I learned a lot about myself in those years.
Yeah. And you'll see that most people learn more about themselves when they put themselves in environments that are uncomfortable. And in this case, it wasn't just limited to you as a coach, but the 6 team members you're talking about, there was a sense of camaraderie, right? Like all of you working together.
Yeah, each year they stuck it out. And it was, that first year was, and you have to remember, I'm bringing in kids and myself as well, coming in from situations. My previous job, I had started that program, but we pretty much immediately got it going in a positive way and got into the playoffs, which was unheard of, for a school from that part of the state. It's right in the middle of the city again. But it was just such a fantastic experience to know that even though you came from winning environments, they stuck it out. They're used to winning or used to playing at a high level. And that first year team, I thank God for the softball coach, Roy Cortman, because he helped me convince 2 softball players. They were my fullbacks on the right and left side. And then we had walk-ons, people I literally... I put a chart up on campus, top 10 reasons to join the women's soccer program, get a new set of cleats, and different, whatever. I wish I had that saved because it was pretty funny, but people responded to it. So and they'd come in and they'd sit down and I go, so what's your experience in the game? And these are girls from the city, many of them. And, normally, in some cultures at that time, the women didn't play, but their brothers did.
Yep.
So they would say things like, well, I've played with my brothers in the backyard or, on the street. And I said, well, what teams have you played on? So I haven't played on a team. Well, now they are on a college team at the Division I level. And we didn't win our first game until match number 17. I almost felt sorry for that coach. And this is a true story. She was in tears on the steps. It was at our place. And she just and I knew her. We were kind of friends, actually. And I felt so bad for her. I wanted to be happy that we finally got a win, but she was so sad because she had lost to LIU Brooklyn, a team that hadn't won a game yet. Mm-hmm. So very, very tough for her. But I fondly look back at that, very fondly.
Yeah. Glenn, you've coached hundreds, if not thousands of athletes. What do you think is more important? Is it talent or is it mindset?
Oh, mindset particularly, yeah, because my favorite players that I've coached over the years are the ones that the easiest ones were there were no agendas. You didn't have to have meetings with them about their attitude. They were just they took care of their things on their own, their individual things, and they were good for the team. So that's all mindset. Part of that is how they were raised sometimes, because oftentimes on the collegiate level you might bring somebody in and they were all brought up in different ways, right? But they're now they come into this environment and it's not like they're just going to change.
Yep.
Sometimes people remain who they are. And you think that sometimes some of the mistakes I made in recruiting were bringing people in thinking that I'd be able to change them in our environment and in our culture. And it might happen in a small amount of times, a minority amount of times. But for the most part, if you bring in someone that's got a little bit of a negative edge, a lot of times that doesn't change.
And that also seeps into the other team members.
All it takes is one, especially if they're a strong personality. And this is the women's game, but it's definitely true in the men's game too. I've seen it on the professional level, working with the New York City Football Club, where they would, on a couple of occasions, they've jettisoned players. They don't come out and publicly say it, but I know it because of their attitude or how they treat their teammates, or how they treat the support staff and things like that. One thing when I would be out recruiting, and sometimes I'd already have the person in my program, and then I would see them after games. But sometimes it's how the players, and we're talking 15, 16, 17-year-olds that you're recruiting, how they treat their parents after a game. I used to look at that. I wanted to see, do they, not look them in the eye, not, or if the mom says, how you feeling? And the player goes off on her mother. And you can really almost see how someone's going to be with you because that's their authority figure, right? Telling them occasionally, how life has to be and what you need to do. So those were sometimes interesting moments. I will tell you unequivocally that I noticed that a couple of times in my recruiting, and I stopped recruiting the player. That's it. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Or maybe, so long ago, maybe I addressed it just to see what their response would be, but I didn't want to hide the fact that I saw it and I didn't like it, and I wanted them to know, especially if we're deeply, into the process. I think the mental side of it, the psychological handling of things can be far more important than talent. Look, Patrick Vieira, I had the pleasure of my son and I used to watch him when he played for Arsenal, and we'd sit in the living room and watch him. And he was on the Invincibles with Arsene Wenger, the coach. The only team in Premier League history to go through a season undefeated. But Patrick Vieira was this just unbelievable midfielder. He was one of these guys that almost invented, in my mind, the box to box. He was everywhere out of the midfield. Well, years later, I'm doing the New York City FC commentary, and who becomes the second head coach of the New York City Football Club but Patrick Vieira. And so I spent 2.5 years with Patrick, talking to him for about 20 minutes for our pregame show every week, seeing him on the road, having coffees with him. And one time he told me the story, and it has always stood out to me. And I tell this story in the book. It's 1998 World Cup, and France wins it, and Patrick plays in it. He's an important member of that team. But I remember just asking him almost a similar question that you asked me. Was it, what aspect of this team, why were they so good? And it was just an excellent team, fighting for each other. You could just tell it was almost as one. And he said, here's why we won. He said, a majority of the players, almost every one of them, had something adverse happen while they were growing up, whether it was their father passed away or their parents split up or something tragic happened in their life. But he said a majority of the players came from some sort of adverse or traumatic
dysfunction
background. And he said, in his mind, this is his observation, including himself, that because of that, they were more mentally strong in those pressure situations and could handle the global stage of the World Cup and do it, and then do it together because they've come from these different issues and have talked about it amongst themselves. And he even told me that when he was recruiting players for his professional teams, one of the things he looks for is what kind of background did this young man have? And, if they did come up through some sort of tragedy or adversity, he might more, and he likes the way they play and likes them personally, he might more closely look at them than maybe somebody who's had it, kind of easy along the way, or easier. Pretty interesting, huh?
Very interesting. But I think it's pretty common with any of these highly successful, not just athletes, but business people as well, entrepreneurs. There's always something that happened in their childhood or as they were growing up that completely shifted their path. And in a lot of cases, it actually turns out to be worse. So something will happen and, they end up in drugs, they become alcoholics. But the other side is they use that pain as motivation to get whatever it is they want in life. So it's a great story. Yeah, no,
it does work both ways. So it's not a perfect path to success, that's for sure. And I don't think we envy anybody that has trauma, as a 6, 7, or 8-year-old. That's tough.
It is. But is there like a moment in your career as a coach where you realized it's not just about soccer? Because what you're telling me right now is it's talent, but then you're looking at how they're treating their parents. I would have not assumed that that's a coach's job, but the way you're putting it, it's as important as how they are on the field, right?
Well, the nonverbal is, and that's body language, often referred to as part of the nonverbal. And you can tell, in any line of work, in any line of day-to-day life, body language tells all.
Yep.
You don't need any words. So that kind of thing, how do they... I want to know how they're treating the referee. Are they treating the referee with respect, or is it... I would often watch, if I'm watching games, I made sure I stayed till the end of halftime, or at least when halftime was commencing, because I wanted to see how a player down 2-0, how they walked off the field. I wanted to see if they started complaining about the sun or the referees or the coach, whatever. Were there little cliques talking on their own? I just wanted to see how they operated. So that's just another example of what you're saying. The seminal moment, I don't know, but I will tell you, when I first started coaching, all I cared about was winning. How am I going to... I just looked at the soccer only. I didn't think about anybody's life. And I'm working with teenagers, and I didn't think about it. And I'm going to tell you, the moment it hit me that I've got to be a better communicator, and it was while I was coaching at Ridge High School. That was my first full-time coaching job. It wasn't full-time, but it was my first serious coaching job. I started that program. It's where I went to high school. So I knew a lot of the teachers. And it was only a few years out of college. And I was there for 10 years. And I would say a couple, 2 or 3 years into it, maybe even longer, I can't remember. And there was this young lady, and I was very close with her parents. Just a wonderful family. They had moved in from the Southeast, and she was a good player. But something happened along the way, and I don't know, but something happened along the way to her personally, and it might have been who she was hanging out with outside of the team, but she became kind of a different person. Now, because of our relationship and because of the level of player she was, there was an assumption, probably amongst the whole team, that I was going to name her captain. What I did as sort of a tradition, and I don't remember exactly when I started it, is that I would have a banquet at the end of every high school season, and at the banquet I would name the captains for next year. So the banquet ended, this young lady's in the crowd with her parents, and I named the captains, and she wasn't named. And she got up and kind of ran out of the room, had a confrontation is the wrong word to describe it, but her father wanted to talk to me. And he said, let's not talk here. Let's have a phone conversation or meet sometime, but I don't understand what just happened. And then I did speak to him later, and I explained to him what happened, but I said, I've learned a massive lesson here, is that I can't just blindside somebody. Before that, no, it was after that. Another time I learned. So I didn't always, get the message. And I think this was at Rutgers even. But I used to put the starting lineup on the board. So when the players came in for the meeting, the lineup was there. And then we'd go over pregame. There. So one of the players who maybe had started 5 or 6 consecutive games, she walked in and her name was not on the board. I lost her for the game. But in retrospect, and now what I did from that point on is if somebody expected to be in that 11 for whatever the reason, I need to explain it to them before I put it on the board and announce it to the team. So they might be upset, they might be ticked off, they might be cursing me and hoping for my demise, on their whatever. But I've told them and I've prepared them. And any athlete or any person in any lifetime activity, if there's bad news, tell me first before, don't surprise me with it, And so I, the real seminal moment was the captain thing. But you think I would have learned my lesson and have communicated that, or my assistant. Where were my assistants to tell me this? No, I'm just kidding. But no, this is those are the things, and some people might say, hey, you don't need to explain that. I mean, that would be the old school approach, It's just you come in and you take it. Your name's on the list or your name's not on the list. What can I tell you? I don't need to explain this, but I don't really think that's the right way to go.
I guess it depends on the environment as well. I mean, if it's an overly competitive environment, depends on your relationship with the team members. But everything you've mentioned so far has been in and around communication, right? And communication in any context, not just sports, but for this specific conversation, communication on the field, when you're winning or when you're losing, is very different. When the team's losing, the communication goes downhill really quickly because there's anger now, there's emotion. When the team's winning, there is also emotion, but it's a positive emotion. So it could be an increase in effective communication. But what are the fundamentals of communication that you've learned from soccer that the everyday person can apply to their lives?
Well, for soccer, I don't know if this will be a life application, but I'll tell you anyway. It's very important so you have these training sessions during the week leading into a game. And the reason you train is to prepare you for the competition, so that hopefully some of the things that occur during training will now show themselves during the competition. So the thing, again, learning along the way, is at first my thinking is you have to alter and provide a variety of ways to do the same thing, or you're going to lose the player's interest. Mm-hmm. And part of what I learned is if you do that too much, you actually don't get a result of the tactic or the technique that you're trying to. So if do I want to show how to, work a combination close to goal and have 10 different ways to have an exercise leading into it, or do I want to do the same exercise every day and have the players gradually get better?
Yep.
Seminal moment. I'm recruiting in Finland, and I'm watching the Finland national team. It's an indoor training session. It was in the winter. It was just really cold, and they did a pattern to goal. It was a little combination in the midfield. Got the ball wide to the right. Service. Finish. For 45 minutes, they did the exact same pattern. Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing they alternated. So they would have it on the left side with the left-footed player serving, and they'd have it on. And I'm talking about the same players are involved with it.
Yep.
They'd rotate a different player in, probably a reserve. I couldn't really tell, just to give the right leg a little bit of a rest from all the service. And I was thinking to myself, and I was sitting with another coach at the time, and I remember telling him, I said, "Boy, if I did this with my team, they would fade away, and it would become too repetitious, and they would start losing focus, and it would be so I'd have to move on to something else." Yeah. To counter that, I'm watching this, and they're getting better along the way. And by the end, it's boom, boom, wide, boom, head to goal, back of the net every time.
Yeah.
Perfect service, front post. So I really took that, and here's communication again. If you communicate it to your team and tell them the story. Tell them the story, what you're going through when you're doing these sessions, and you're trying to get a certain point across, and how this is the best way.
Yep.
Why do it different ways? Let's just do it. Let's be repetitive. And you know what? I'll provide enough variety in some other areas so that you'll be, it's not going to be a drag. Because and I don't know how good a job I did in this, because since I've retired from coaching and have been doing these thousands of interviews for Sirius XM-FC, and it's mostly coaches, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
And I've talked to multiple professional coaches coaching high-level pro players who talk about ending the training session on something that's fun, on a note, so that when that session ends, they're anticipating the next one. They want to come back to the next one. I don't know how. I didn't, I'm sure I did that at times, but I don't know if I was thinking clearly enough about that's what I want to do, so that tomorrow they're ready to come back in and go. So it's training needs to. So if there's a lesson, I don't know if that's a life lesson, but you don't have to provide, or you shouldn't have to provide variety if the final product is going to be better. Yep, repetition versus having to go into all these different ways to do it. But I will say, but you still have to. You can't just do the same thing for 9 months straight. I'm not even suggesting that. I'm just saying, players sometimes get a little stuck, and I think if you prepare them, they'll understand why.
Yeah, I think it's shiny object syndrome, right? So we're all focused on just doing the next best thing or doing a bunch of things at once. But if you focus on one thing and become a master of that thing, then
sure,
it's hard for anybody to compete against you, right? So the Finland team example, they're probably using that strategy for just that game, but they're winning that game. and then they'll probably do another one for another game.
Yeah.
So that way, the other teams can't really they can't watch footage of that football, that match and say, okay, this is what we should expect, this is what they're going to do on us. No, they'll do variation. Over time, there should be variation. But in short periods of time, the lesson is just be a master at one thing, right?
Yeah.
Don't try to be a master at everything, because it's impossible for one team to be good at all the different variations,
right,
or team plays, whatever the football term is. But in communication, the flip side of communication is listening. And as a leader, as a coach, I think that anybody in a leadership position needs to be a good listener. What have you learned over the years? Because you've dealt with teenagers, and they have their own emotions, and they have a bunch of other things going on in their lives. They're growing up, they're becoming adults. So what have you learned as far as listening is concerned over the years?
Not just listening to the players, but your assistants, the support staff, your administrators. And I think over the years I've been a pretty good listener. I will tell you this, I've become a better listener as an interviewer, because that's what interviewing is. And we talked about before the start of this that our goal is to have a conversation. It's a conversation. You're not looking at a notepad. Here's the question. Boom, I answer. Here's the question. I answered. It's a conversation. The only way you can have a conversation, whether it's an interview setting or I just met you, at somebody's party, and you have to listen. And you've been in this situation before, I'm sure, where somebody's not listening to you because of the way they respond.
Of course.
And sometimes it's the eye contact. But somebody interviewed me recently about the interviewing process. So it's interesting. I was being interviewed about interviewing, and so what would you say to someone who's getting started? Listen. It's the most critical part of doing these interviews that I do, because what happens, and it takes a while, because it's a bit of a nerve-wracking profession. If you're live on the air, you have 15 minutes, you have this list of questions that you prepared, and what you learn is that 75 to 80% of everything you prepare for, whether it's an interview or whether it's the commentary I do for New York City FC, cutting room floor, you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it, unless the exception is if you have one or two questions in there you feel like have to be asked, then make sure you get to them.
Yeah.
So if you have a little non sequitur in there, because you want to get that question in, then you do that. But you learn, and you have to be comfortable to interview. So I would say I've been doing interviews consistently for 11 years now, and first 4 or 5 years, I'm so much better now than I was then, because it's one of those things that, and I think there are very few among us that are very, very good at it.
Yeah.
And it's because it's a kind of an art form. So it's all about listening. And as with anything else, I suppose, I wish I could go back, because I'd be a better listener to my players, to my assistants, to the support staff, to the administrators. I'd be a better listener. But I think I was a pretty good one back then.
Yeah.
But listen is, if you ask me to encapsulate my entire life as a professional, that would be a word, I think, that would resonate.
Listening. Yeah, no, even as a host, you see lots of hosts trying to impose their own opinions and biases into a conversation. And
they put themselves in it, yeah.
And the thing is that why'd you call a guest on your show if you're going to just share your own thoughts, right? You might as well just kick them off and talk yourself.
No, it's... there are a lot of people who that is one of their interview techniques is making sure they've inserted themselves into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey guys, thank you for getting to the midpoint of this podcast. Listen, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you for giving us a chance to listen or watch this podcast. I've put a lot of effort into it and I'm so happy to see people enjoying it. The reason why I'm doing this podcast is number one, I love authentic storytelling, but the problem I see is every other podcast or show has the same guest coming over and over again. And I do think that that defeats the purpose of authentic storytelling. So my guarantee to you is I will always bring on people with authentic stories, people who are relatable, and people who have lived these larger than life stories. And number two, I just need feedback from you guys. I need feedback on if I'm doing a good job, feedback on if I'm doing a bad job, feedback through the comments, through Instagram DMs. Anything will help me better my craft. I appreciate you guys for getting to the midpoint of this podcast and I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thank you. Glenn, I mean, we went through the listening thing. I think it makes perfect sense from both angles, right? As a host of thousands and thousands of interviews and as a coach. But where does confidence for you come from? Because I'm sure there were many, many moments where you had to instill confidence into your athletes. Again, citing at the fact that they were young teenagers. Confidence is not easy for a teenager, especially when you're playing in front of your friends and family in school. It's very, very hard. And I've been in situations where I've literally, like, it's fight or flight, right? You shivering, you can't even perform. So how do you instill that confidence or how have you instilled that confidence over the years in your athletes?
One of my interviews was with a sports psychologist, Dan Abrahams. I wish I had him around when I was coaching full-time. And he calls it ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. And athletes go through that constantly. And he's worked with and currently works with Premier League athletes, professional golfers, professional rugby players. So again, he's with players at the highest level who you would think, well, why are they lacking confidence? Because it doesn't take much to all of a sudden lose it and have to. So I think we all oftentimes have these automatic negative thoughts. He calls it an ant farm when it gets like too much. So what do? You try to, from my standpoint, in a little bit more primitive way than Dan might calculate it as a sports psychologist, but it's try not to lay into a player or speak to a player or address a player only when there are mistakes or there are moments that
shortcomings
where you need something that needs improvement. So what I was taught in coach education was, be as close to 50-50 as possible, with the constructive criticism, which is the way you would like to do it, even though I would raise my voice sometimes, and I think that's necessary. But it wasn't all the time. I mean, I went into a couple of halftimes and blasted the team. Yeah. But if you do that every time, it's not going to be impactful.
Yep.
And, I remember one time in particularly that we came back out and, scored 3 or 4 goals and won the match, because they recognized that it was like, whew, yeah, we really weren't here and had nothing to do with tactics. It was all about getting ourselves up for the battle. So I think that you have to be very careful, especially with, as you described, a young student athlete going through a lot of things in their lives. And again, as I grew older as a coach and then had children myself, I think that's where it really hit me when I had my own kids and they started doing activities. It's like, there are emotions involved here, but I also understand there's a lot of things going on in their lives that maybe I didn't look closely enough at. Yeah. But I hadn't had the experience of family before and my own children. So I think that was a moment when my kids were born and then started whatever activities they were involved with. It was and then what was going on in their lives. You had to cater to things.
Yeah. But then on the flip side of confidence, you also have arrogance. And I'm sure you've dealt with some arrogant players over the years, but how do you deal, or not even how do you deal, but how do you ensure that the players know the difference between being confident and being arrogant? Because sometimes, and I've seen in my own life, we'll have these A-star players on our team and they're just so cocky and arrogant about every single thing they do. How do you ensure that doesn't happen within a team?
Well, I think you first have to see how it's impacting the team, because there is good arrogance and there's poor arrogance.
Yep.
That will have a negative, negative zappers, we used to call them. And part of it would be somebody that's arrogant. I think what I ended up doing, right or wrong, is if somebody's scoring 2 goals a game. And they're arrogant in how they carry themselves, and it's not impacting the team negatively. Sorry, that's 2 goals a game.
Yep.
So I would ask the midfielders, just let her be the way she is, and the fact is, some of the players that I can vividly see in my mind, they worked hard.
Yeah.
But they had that arrogance. Now, the arrogance that might impact the game negatively or the team, I found film to be very instructive. I had a player who ended up becoming a pro, played professionally for many years, really talented kid, and she didn't understand, and she had a issue with why she wasn't playing. She just couldn't see it, and her approach was, not always the best, I would say, from her to me. So I remember we were on a bus trip, and I made up 20 or 30 clips, because the issue was she was a forward. And we demanded of our forwards that they defend, that they're the first line of defense. And honestly, sometimes from the club team, some of these players were coming from, where they were like the stars and they were the attacking stars. They weren't defending on their club teams. Yeah. So we're asking them to defend for the first time maybe in a long time. And I said, well, I've told you. And she goes, oh, no, I feel like I'm working hard enough. So I had 20 or 30 clips, and by the time... Now, this was one where I didn't go 50-50. I went full bore. You're not closing down. You're not denying service. All these principles that we had. And it was a good moment. Yeah. Because as distressing as it might have been for her, I said, this is what, these other things you're doing are fine, but you have to do this. And then you'll play. Yeah. So she changed, and I'm thinking back, and pretty much of a sweetheart kind of kid, but at the time it was difficult. But again, she was probably her first. Yeah, she's 18 years old, 19 years old, and so it's college is a challenge because they're leaving home for the first time. Many of them, they're in this new environment. Some, if they're coming from out of state, they're coming to New Jersey, which is like, what is this? Or they're going into Brooklyn, or they're going into Jersey City. It's like, whoa. Yeah. So collegiate coaching, and it's become very difficult with the transfer portal and NIL. That's added to the challenge for coaches. So I'm happy not to be involved in college coaching anymore. I have to say. I'm really enjoying my life and getting to talk about the game rather than... but I do miss coaching a little bit. I coached club until 2 years ago at PDA, Players Development Academy, which is another area of my coaching life that really helped me develop into the ability to do all these things I do. So the coaching set me up to do all this broadcasting. Yes. Because I have the knowledge. The knowledge. Yeah. I've got my coaching badges. I've observed so many top coaches in their training sessions and how they do things. I'm talking, Zooming. I mean, the amount of time I've just put into learning about the game is the reason I can do these things I do now. So I owe a lot of people a lot of credit along the way in the coaching fraternity. and the administrators who elected to hire me, and all these different things. When coaching was never in my I was not going to become a coach.
Yeah,
I came out of college to be a broadcaster, which I got a job pretty immediately. But all of a sudden, I'm playing indoor soccer one day, and the local town councilman came up to me and goes, my son's club team needs a coach. Can you coach? I go, I've never coached. Well, I hear you talking about the game. You know what you're doing? And I go, so I'll help. Of course I'll help. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of went from there.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, it was completely accidental.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Completely accidental. And now I would like to be, if I'm going to be, I suppose I'm known more as a broadcast. People in many ways know me more as a broadcaster than a coach, which is fine. But I will always think of myself as a coach.
When you're talking about the girl who lacked the self-awareness of what she was doing wrong in the game, there are also lots of young athletes, actually athletes all around the world, who have a lack of self-belief. So it's the flip side of this girl. She thought she had it all going for her, but there are also other girls or guys, any athletes, who are doing well, but because of mental blockades, so because they're telling themselves they're not good enough, they aren't able to perform to the best of their ability. What do you do with an athlete like that? Because I'm sure you've come across.
You're back to the ant farm again.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what it is. Well, I think professionals. Another sports psychologist I spoke with is the head of sports psychology for U.S. figure skating, but she also works with soccer athletes. She's in the book as well. Her name's Dr. Caroline Silby, and she worked with a figure skater named Amber Glenn, who has won 3 consecutive U.S. championships, but she hasn't medaled in the Olympics yet. So we'll see what happens coming up in Milan. And part of our discussion, and it was really interesting, she said she talks to athletes a lot about what they're good at. Mm-hmm. And she said oftentimes they have difficulty sharing what they're good at because they're thinking more about what's not going well. But even if they can figure out what they're good at, they don't know what has led up to that. So there's another aspect of it and she said that's where we need to work at it. What is it? And if it's psychological, which is what she'll work on, but what is it that led you to having success at that moment? And she said 99% of the athletes have no idea.
They don't know the source.
They don't know what led them to that. So she digs a little deeper into that category. I interviewed a woman named Tracy Kevins, who is the under-20 women's national team coach. And she... one thing she does when the players come into national team camp is she sits them down and reviews what they sort of a self-evaluation of themselves. And she says, I'll ask them, what do you think you need improvement on? And they'll have this laundry list of things, and then she'll say, well, what's your magic ability? What is your, how do you, what do you have? And she said so often they don't think of themselves in those terms. So it's very natural. I think it's, it's deep rooted, and I don't think there's any easy way out of it. It's not going to happen with the snap of a finger. It's got to happen over time. Yep. What I've learned along the way is the way to make players or give players more confident is to let them play through their mistakes and have those failures. I know you had a guest on recently who talked about failure and how, you can't be successful till you fail. There's a famous Michael Jordan quote where he lists like the number of shots he's missed in his career, the number of times he was given the last shot to win a game and he missed, and he said, I had all those failures and I won 6 NBA championships. And he said without those failures, the other thing wouldn't have happened. Yep. So you have to let the athlete get through the mistakes without interjecting all the time. And in soccer, creativity, that's a big topic of discussion on the men's side, that compared to other countries where we're not particularly creative. We don't develop those kind of players. Why is that? One of my interviews recently was with a gentleman named Zeka Neto, who I've gotten to know while I was recruiting. He's a director of the San Jose Soccer Club in California, but he's from Brazil. Mm-hmm. And he was a...
That's the soccer's instilled in their culture.
But this creative part,
yeah.
He played for the Fluminense Academy, which is one of the top academies globally. And he said until they were 12 years old, they had the theme or the motto or the mantra was creativity before structure. They didn't worry about, how the back four were going to organize zonally and all these things. Creativity before structure. That was the emphasis on everything. That's why every Brazilian player is comfortable on the ball, and the fullback on the right side can work his way out of a tight jam because he's confident to do it, because he's been doing these things, without insertion from the coach or criticism from the coach. You can't be a back and try to make a move like that, which is, I'll tell you, I'm in coaching schools along the way, it's like, don't dribble out of the back if there's a defender there. And so that's drilled into you.
Yeah.
So I get to my teams, and if there's pressure on the back, play the ball to the midfielder and work a combination. Don't try to dribble past that player. When it's interesting, because if you have that ability too, now you have one more weapon to get out of that jam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
failure is a stepping stone. I mean, regardless of where you are in your career, I 100% agree. You have to kind of let people fail, because that's the best.
It's very hard as a coach. As a young coach,
yeah,
it's so hard. Because you know what just happened, and you want to get in there and go, no, this way. But you learn along the way, and the other thing that I've learned, and that is becoming more of a trend too, is the actual teaching. Mm-hmm. Teaching meaning classroom. People who are educated to become teachers in elementary schools and high schools and professors on the collegiate level. Mm-hmm. That's what they went to school for.
Yeah.
Well, those techniques are now being taught in the U.S. Pro license, which is the top license in the States. So you're teaching the game.
Yeah.
As an instructor, knowing how students will react. This guy Doug Lemoff, who is probably going to be in volume 2 of the Crooks Conversations, put it on frame. He's a teacher. But he has instructed in the pro license course. They've brought him in, and he was very nervous about it because he's showing the video of an orchestral director with a young group. I can't remember if it was elementary or slightly above that. But it was his techniques of getting his message across to young people playing an instrument and showing it to a bunch of professional soccer coaches, right?
Yeah.
So that part of the coaching game, and then there's the side of, there's still old school that don't want to maybe run that deep. There's a simple phrase, the game is the best teacher, and indeed it is at times. But you have to have a blend of both, because the game is probably still the best teacher, but you still have to instruct the game.
Yeah.
So how do you fit all that in? We're still figuring it out, I think.
Yeah, I think it's... I was talking to another guest about this. You're always learning. The day you stop learning is the day your life is over. So even as a coach, what you're telling me is it's constant learning. You're just learning every new game.
You have to. And those that get stuck... And I haven't come across that many. I mean... One of our legendary coaches in the States is Bruce Arena, and he's now in MLS with the San Jose Earthquakes. He's won 5 MLS Cups with the LA Galaxy. The U.S. men's national team, best performance ever in a World Cup was 2002. He was our head coach. And it was interesting because he is a guy that continues to develop, but he's very stubborn about certain things that are being presented in modern coaching, which is, for instance, a more specialized group of coaches with you. Like the NFL has, there's a coach for almost every player, but you have the linebacker coach, the offensive line coach, defensive line coach, running back coach, receiver coach, quarterback coach. There's a coach for everybody. Mm-hmm. Special teams coach. So the first specialist in soccer became the goalkeeper coach, mm-hmm. which hasn't been around that long, but that was the first real specialized position. But now it's becoming set piece coaches now. So every Premier League team in England has a set piece coach. In MLS, there might be one or two full-time set piece coaches. It's going, but Bruce Arena told me last preseason, he kind of looked at me and just smirked and said, I don't think we need a set piece coach. I know how to do that. I know how to do that. So there's still some, and he's now in his 70s. Yeah. But he's also evolved with how the teams are trained and how he's trying to get certain things out of players. So he's definitely evolved, and he talks about how he's evolved. But,
and how the games change over time as well, right?
Yeah, you have to. He started at the University of Virginia, where you were still playing with a sweeper back instead of like a flat back four. So, you're forced to evolve, or you'll be left behind. So there's no way a guy like that could be successful unless he listens to the young people around him at least a little bit. I don't know if he's going to change about the specialists, but
so you mentioned, and you've been in the process of writing a series of books. You've published the first one. It's called Put It on Frame. You've taken lessons from different subject matter experts from all the people you've met over the years, and you've essentially consolidated it into one, not even a big book, but one easy to read book. What is a one lesson from all the lessons you've learned over the years, over thousands of interviews, broadcasts, coaching sessions? What's that one lesson you want to give to the average person? And I'm not talking specifically about the athlete. I'm talking about the average person. Because in the era we're in right now, with our attention spans going down to zero, and this abundance of content and abundance of everything, how is one supposed to live a life that's fulfilling, content, and a life that's led by the right values? Because I do think that you live by the right values.
Yeah, I think being open to change, and we just talked about Bruce Arena, who has been, but there's certain aspects to his coaching that you suspect he won't change. There's a young man it's actually the only player that I have in Volume 1, and I'm working on Volume 2 now, and then Volume 3 a little bit later, and I'm trying to sort out whether I should have more athletes in the book as opposed to just coaches and experts. But athletes are experts too. And Diego Luna, who plays for Real Salt Lake and with the U.S. men's national team, I would be really surprised if he's not part of the U.S. team for the World Cup. He tells a great story in the book, and this was from last preseason when I got a chance to sit down with him for about an hour. Just a wonderful young man who comes from a bit of adversity as a youngster. And his family is all soccer, and he admitted he didn't and really doesn't have like a great relationship with his parents because everything's just been soccer. But he told the story of, and it involved eye contact. And I think this is an illuminating, and I've heard from a couple of people that have read the book now, and they go like, oh my God, what a story that was. So he got signed by Real Salt Lake, and he was playing for their reserve team. It's called the Monarchs at first, and then he made the first team, the senior team. And athletes in soccer in particular, they tend to train in the morning. So you get up early, train, and your day sometimes is done at 1 or 2. Yeah. So what do? Yeah. What you do is very important. It's kind of, sometimes it's what you don't do that will lead to greater success. So he had a lot of free time, and he has an older brother who he really looks up to.
Yep.
And they decided together that he needed to work on his communication skills. So what he did is he took a job. So he's getting paid to train and play, but he took a job part-time at a Dutch Brothers in Salt Lake City. Now, I didn't know what Dutch Brothers was, but now I do. They're across the country. I don't know how many there are, but what they're noted for is community. It's like you come in and you sit with a stranger and you introduce yourself and you talk, that sort of thing. So all the baristas have to be oriented in that fashion. Well, he told the story. Like he said, his eye contact. He never looked at his parents when he talked to him. He didn't look at his coaches when he was talking to him. He couldn't look at them, and he kind of, he would like shuffle his feet, and so his brother and him decided, let's get a job there, and you'll be forced to look people in the eye because you have to communicate because that's what your job is.
Yeah.
So he learned to be a better communicator. And that decision was made, and I remember asking him, I said, did somebody tell you that about this eye contact thing and the shuffling of the feet? He goes, no, I always knew I did it. And now I wanted to solve it. And the kicker to the story is I spent an hour with him, talking to him. He looked me straight in the eye throughout the entire conversation. But he said it enhanced my relationship with my coaches, with my teammates, and he became a very popular player. So with the fans, he's now married. Just a little thing like that helped change his life. But he was open to it.
Yeah.
So I would say, be aware of yourself and be open to those things that might, enhance not just opportunities, but just how you communicate with people. Because I think and I feel so when I hear people are lonely and, in many cases people that live alone, they might be suffering from that, but that always saddens me. I just think, because I think one of the favorite parts of my life is like, talking to people.
Yeah.
Whether it's friends or meeting new people or my wife or my children. And it's really, I think having those powers is pretty important. But you have to be open to understanding if it's not working, why.
Yeah.
Not just in communication, but whatever. So I guess being open to things, because we can easily be, and I'll readily admit I wasn't, in the early stages. I might have been, until I was really open to things, I might have been in my 50s. So
you're in your 30s now, right?
Yeah. What's that? The Benjamin?
Yeah. Button. Yeah.
Button. Yeah. I'm going the other way.
I see. No, but you're right. I'll tie it into luck. Everybody thinks that successful people got lucky, but the one thing they're missing is they were open to the notion of getting lucky. They put themselves in situations and environments to get lucky. If you're not out there sitting at a cafe, trying to network with people, putting yourself in positions where you might get an opportunity, that's where the luck comes from. I don't like the word lucky. I don't believe in luck. I don't like the word lucky. I'll tell you a story here. My wife, Mary, bought this book when we had the children. Ryan is my stepson, so I wasn't around for the first one, but Morgan is my biological daughter, and she had this book, Baby Wise. And she said, I did this with Ryan, and we're doing this with Morgan, and we're going to follow everything that's in this book. I don't recall who the author is, but it's called Baby Wise. And I can tell you, I've recommended this to at least 100 people because I told them it works. Yeah. And what happens is very simply, you have to strictly schedule your baby for times to sleep and times to be awake. Meaning, we had a squirt bottle. It didn't come out too heavily, but if
Morgan was in the back seat. We turned, and she started fading. It wasn't time to sleep, so you just squirt her, in the forehead or something with a little water, and keep her awake. So they got her, so there's patterns. But the biggest thing is when the kids they're in their crib, and when they start to cry, you cannot go and pick them up. You cannot bring them into your bed and have them sleep with you. Now, all this, the result of all this is that after 4, 5, or 6 weeks, your baby is sleeping through the night. So quality of life for the parent is,
through the roof, yeah.
Through the roof. So what happens is, we always say it's not luck. Oh, you're so lucky that no, we're not lucky. We worked at it. Don't tell me we're lucky. Yeah. And I tell, and then sometimes we'll hear, oh, yes, won't sleep through the night. And I said, I told you to get the baby wise. I told you to do it. Oh, we can't do that. I have to have the baby sleep on my chest, while I'm taking a nap. No, you just can't. You can't do some of the things that traditionally you just maybe really want to do. And by the way, you could still be very close to your children. They'll still hug you and everything else.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's why I don't like the word luck, because people called us lucky. We were like, we're not lucky. We worked at it.
Yeah. It's been a wonderful conversation, Glenn. For me, the clear takeaway, because funnily enough, I've always wanted to be an athlete. I just never had it in me.
What did you want to play?
So initially it was track.
That's right. You talked about track and field.
I went to Sri Lanka for track, and then I got into soccer, played for a couple of years, and cricket. I was captain, but my grades were horrible, so my principal didn't let me travel, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever. But the point is, and what I've gathered from you, and we've had many conversations before this, and I've read the drafts. I haven't read the final book yet. I have to. Is number one, to your point, you have to be open to the opportunity. But then also I feel like you as an individual, you've been able to reinvent yourself time and time again. You'll see the average person will pick one career and that's it. That's the end of it. I'm a coach and that's it. You've been not a coach once, but over and over and over again in so many different environments, on a college level, on a high school level, on a national level. And then you're also a commentator and you also have a show. And I think you are, just like you said, have always been open to opportunity and have been open to whatever life throws at you. And that is the single biggest problem that I think all of us face. And in my opinion, from my eyes, it ties into ego, because our ego gets in the way of, I've built my 30-year coaching career. Why would I go and host a show for a couple $1,000s a month? Right. So
no, the broadcasting industry, that's true. I mean, some people make a lot of money, but not many.
Yeah.
And
I know how it is. It's not that lucrative.
So it's, you're doing it more for a passion, and of course it helps, but and even the coaching. I mean, I've said to Michael O'Neill, my longtime assistant, who's now the head coach at Rutgers, we've often said we're coaching the wrong sport, because we see the salaries of the collegiate football players, football coaches, and the collegiate basketball coaches, and and then they get fired and they get paid for the next 3 years still, and that sort of thing, and
they got lucky.
So we've enjoyed our lives just fine, despite not being wealthy. Which you could choose a coaching profession that might put you more in that in that position. But
I think you're wealthier than everybody else. I've seen how you are with your wife, and a lot of people would trade all the money they have in the world for the relationship you have with your wife, and you've mentioned your kids a few times. So that's wealth. At the end of it, the only thing that really matters is how you were around your family and your friends, and you're doing what you love. You're talking to people. You're having conversations. And
I if I could tell just one more story, because I was just thinking of it from what you said, because that word lucky's come up a couple of times. So this could be called fortunate. So the word fortunate, could equal lucky, but I think fortunate is more like there's an earning aspect to being fortunate.
Yeah.
And the gentleman, Mark Chernoff, who hired me, or was part of the hiring process when I got out of college to get my first job, which was almost immediate, full-time sports director at a radio station in New Jersey. 35 years later, he's the program director at WFAN. When I call him out of the blue and say, Mark, I'm gonna retire from Rutgers. I want to move into a different. I want to go into a different direction. I want to get back into broadcasting because that's what I started. Now the coaching took over. Now I wanted to get back into broadcasting and close out my professional life in that manner. And I just said to him, I said, "Gosh, do you know anybody doing soccer games?" Because I wanted to do soccer too. Because now I've had all the soccer experience. And he chuckled and he said, well, it's pretty interesting because we just signed a contract to carry the New York Yankees on the radio. But the provisor, in order to get that contract, we have to pick up the first 3 years of this new pro soccer team, New York City FC. I don't know if you've heard of it. I go, oh, yeah, I know all about it. And so still had to do an audition tape for him and things like that. In fact, the guy who I started doing it with, we went to a Sky Blue game. That was a women's team at Rutgers University, where I'd spent so many years. And we sat in the stands with 2 microphones, and that was our audition tape. And Mark Chernoff hired us. So a guy I had, and I've told the story specifically to my children at first, to just say, this is why you don't burn bridges or lose contact with people, because I'd stayed in touch with them, but I never, a lot of people that worked at the radio station I was at when I got hired coming out of college, he moved to a WNEW, which was a top FM station. And a lot of people would call Mark because they kind of, hey, Mark, you got any openings? I never really did that, because I got involved in the coaching, but we stayed in touch. And Mary and my wife was very close to Mark too, and he was a graduate of Rutgers. So it was just, that's crazy, That was just crazy timing. But I'm not calling it lucky because I had a relationship with the guy. And,
you called him. A lot of people wouldn't even get to the call. Because I have too big of an ego. I'll figure it out myself. This is men inherently, we have this, right? We'll figure it all out. We'll figure it all out ourselves. But no, you maintained the relationship for years. You never maintained it just for the sake of he's going to be useful for me one day. It was just a genuine relationship, right?
It's a good. We liked each other.
And then more importantly, you were willing to call him and be vulnerable with him about the fact that I want to change my career. That's not luck. I don't think that's fortunate either. I think that's just you were open to opportunity, and that's it.
And then he hired me again. How about that? But the current trend is men are going they're more vulnerable now. Are you aware of this, Umer? You've got to be more vulnerable now.
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
But it is. Vulnerability is a superpower. And I'm sure you've seen this a lot with the people you've interviewed, especially the high performers. Maybe not like the older ones, because the older generation may not be as vulnerable as the newer one, but I do see lots of leadership coaches and just anybody in a leadership position, they try to push the whole be vulnerable with me, be open with me, be transparent.
But the important people to be vulnerable publicly, and Simone Biles is a perfect example. But even prior to that, on the soccer stage, I'm forgetting his name, but he was a professional player, Mertesacker. Per Mertesacker. I'm pretty sure I've got this right. He was a big center back. And he, I don't know if it was an article, and I don't know if it was the one that Derek Jeter started, where the players tell their story. But he came out of the blue. No one, maybe his teammates, maybe other people, but he came out of the blue with this admittance of how difficult. He talked about moments, and he was not just depressed, but he was mentally unstable through this athletic career because of all the pressure that was on him. And it was a pretty important moment in the soccer arena, because now all of a sudden you started hearing dribs and drabs from others, and now it helped make people more open to talk to the psychologist or whoever might
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
or the leadership coach or whoever it might be that you have to expose these things to. So the people on the biggest stage, and I think that's where it's really turned, is that they've made themselves vulnerable. And I know Simone Biles is a woman, so we were talking about men earlier, but I think it helps both sides.
No, even women, I feel like a lot of women avoid being vulnerable out of fear of not being seen as professional or serious.
Or strong as a
or
man.
strong, exactly.
Yeah.
But no, and on the other side, you also see like when these really popular athletes or anybody in like a place of influence is vulnerable, the fans see them as more human. Because right now they're larger than life, right? He's an athlete. He's a superstar. But when they're talking about the same problems you're facing, mental health, physical health, family problems, whatever, you come to the realization that, wow, there's actually more things in common than not. So I like that. Thank you, Glenn. I enjoyed this conversation.
As often happens with the interviews I conduct, it's not just people involved in the game of soccer. It overlaps into other sports. One sport that I've been attached to for many years, and not only from how the game is coached, but just the different thoughts of top coaches like a Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University, what they offer. It is positive information for all coaches, no matter what their sport. But there's a basketball coach, the legendary John Wooden, who coached at UCLA. I think they won 10 consecutive national championships. But beyond that, he was a master. And the quote that I have often shared, not only with colleagues, but with athletes, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And that's, I think, something, that's the message that resonates with me, is that you have to keep being open-minded and learning more about your profession, about your relationships, whatever it might be. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. I think that says it all.